Thank you. Let's just make sure the buttons work now. So I kind of put this together. It's people that follow me on LinkedIn might have seen this theme before. I talk about preparation for the storm. I've been doing healthcare and medical device security for, well, since the early 2000s. It wasn't very well recognized or known back then. We actually talked to medical device manufacturers when I was back in the Air Force then, working for the Surgeon General's office, clinical engineering side. We were actually told that what we were asking for, no one else was asking for, so it wasn't seen as a need. So we tried to convey at that time that, you know, we thought connected device security was going to be something that the industry would come around to. And lo and behold, 15 years later, the industry has come around. And along with healthcare, we've also got the Internet of Things that has come around as we've seen increased connectivity to endpoints at home with smart lights and smart refrigerators and smart toasters, as well as smart offices. Certainly COVID this year has brought more and more people connected with IP cameras and everything. So the proliferation of all these internet connected endpoints has certainly changed what we see from a security perspective, whether you're a home user, commercial provider, or working in the industry. Again, my specific industry and our solution is focused on healthcare, but we support, you know, the broad connected endpoints across a healthcare environment. And several in this space do traditionally support, you know, municipalities and casinos and everything. So my perspective on the storm is coming is the more connections are coming, threats are increasing, the pace of threats are increasing, and if we don't do some preparation to be prepared for the storm, that it could create havoc. So the conversation about why artificial intelligence is necessary, we see that ongoing threats, again, in healthcare, again, the focus of my slide, but you can look at industrial controls, you can look at banking, you can look at just corporate threat that many of the people before me discussed today. And even I heard a conversation about the election infrastructure. So that continues to be a point of interest across security practitioners and professionals. Data breaches, we all see it in the news, see it in the headlines, going up constantly, whether in healthcare, going after private data because of the financial influence it has versus IP theft, which again, we're looking, you know, that's been in the news of late as well. 2020 is well ahead of all other years in past years. Again, presenters have shown us that today, the pace of threats, ransomware, people now, where it used to be you didn't pay the ransom, more institutions are paying the ransom to get their data back. And then what I found interesting is talking about the cost, not just the cost of breaches alone, but it was just today, or no, it was yesterday, I saw an article about 2020 to 2025. It's a $1.25 billion opportunity in the security interest just in healthcare. So as AI and automation platforms become available, not only is there opportunity for those selling in that space, I believe there could be opportunity for managed service providers to come into that space. I think it was Chris that mentioned about, you know, not just plugging in and getting the new shiny object. Well, the challenge with these platforms and the amount of data they're collecting is you got to educate the human, which we heard about, and that's getting the people to understand all the data these new systems are collecting, and then not just taking the data, but presenting it so that it becomes actionable information. So a shiny object alone is not going to solve your problem. So again, the focus of this slide, again, with our space being healthcare, but you could apply it to not just, we talk about clinical transformation, COVID seeing this escalation and movement in healthcare to telehealth, which is putting more endpoints out across the entire healthcare ecosystem. And again, pretty much every other industry is doing the same thing. So we're getting more connected endpoints, connecting back to the touch points within our corporate infrastructure. So again, it creates a bigger attack surface for the security practitioners that are responsible for the organization. And then we also see, as I mentioned, increased vulnerabilities and risks. And I think it was our last speaker, Luke, that gave us that exponential increase in CVEs from 2010 to 2020. So 2021, we don't expect to be much different than 2020, likely another increase. So I got this out of something I picked up off of LinkedIn, and this was also discussed earlier by one of our thought leaders. And it's talking about, while we do have an increase in threats, this was from, I think Resilient was a paper I got it from, but they talk about the increase in threats, but then having AI and automation, artificial intelligence that's able to kind of parse through some of that. And what we're going to talk about is a risk-based approach to vulnerability management, which is something our company is focused on because of the sheer volume that's coming in. And if you just look at the sheer volume and act on everything, it's basically you're either going to get what Luke said is compliance fatigue, or you're going to be a firefighter and fighting every dumpster fire that comes across your desk. So taking the other perspective that Luke shared, and we believe that's a risk focus versus just counting CVEs, because the number of CVEs are just going to continue to increase. So our philosophy is AI and automation conveys a new approach to maybe addressing a security program. And again, our company typically focuses on connected medical devices. And we heard early on with our first panel about Howard and his concern in dealing with medical devices, connected medical devices, is you can't just have automation necessarily turn off a medical device. You could have an angio suite. Maybe you're doing an invasive procedure on a patient and it starts behaving badly, or you have automated patching going out. And in the real world, you don't want to be in the middle of a catheter procedure on somebody's heart and then all of a sudden have the angio system go out. So we do have a little bit different perspective. Little bit different perspective on how medical devices are handled as an endpoint. But we see this as an opportunity not only for platform providers, but also managed service providers that come in, again, help digest this data and be a professional in the space and bring that expertise to the customer to help them understand the challenges. So where we see this going is Gartner had this, I read an article about Gartner and their strategy of continuous adaptive risk and threat assessments. So again, not just counting CVEs, but a program that looks at CVEs, does exploit analysis on your endpoints and determines what are the real threats. So the organization and the constrained resources being people, time, and money, which again in healthcare today, well, all organizations today are constrained across those three factors. Again, those that went before me also addressed those challenges. So we feel that with AI and automation, it's going to permit an organization to use these new tool sets and focus on the high risks of the organization. And after you've addressed high risks, then you can address medium risks. And you can just, again, scale your organization using the tool sets, taking the data, creating actionable information to address the risks to the organization. And again, I see this, not just across healthcare. This can affect all organizations, can affect municipalities, utilities. There are active solutions out there. We happen to work in a passive space because of the regulatory environment of connected medical devices and what they have to go through for software validation. It's actually a challenge for the manufacturer levied due to the regulations from the FDA. So that's what they have to do. And again, another opportunity for managed service providers that understand the spaces and can use these tools to come in and bring that value to help an organization address risk instead of just running after it, running at every dumpster fire with a fire extinguisher. We don't see that as an effective approach. So in the context of the Gartner and the continuous adaptive risk and threat approach to assessments, we look at the imperatives as defined by Gartner, and we see AI and automation being a tool to replace just security gateways and becoming context aware and adaptive, because they're always on, they're always reevaluating the endpoints, reevaluating the threat vectors, and as was discussed earlier, getting tuned to better adapt to the environment they're in, so you can deliver a security program that is more attuned to the organization. I don't think healthcare is unique in any industry. If you've seen one network, you've seen one network. Every network, and every institution is unique. Second imperative is to continuously discover, monitor, assess, and prioritize risk. And there's that prioritization of risk that allows you to focus your constrained resources where there's truly potential harm to your organization. Again, if you're not prioritizing risk and you're just chasing after the next dumpster fire, you could be focused on something that's not even a threat to your organization. Then you're wasting resources, you're wasting time, you're wasting money, you're wasting your people focusing on the wrong things. So, Howard, and then also as Howard mentioned, again with medical devices and unintended consequences, if you're focusing on the wrong thing, maybe you're going to create an unintended consequence. And Luke also discussed the variability across exploits and endpoints. So a platform, a CVE on this device isn't the same CVE doesn't apply to the other devices. They may not even apply to like devices. So again, AI and automation that can assess every exploit against every device and risk profile that, again, gets your organization and the organization's resources focused on the right things. And then a platform that can take all those inputs and perform risk and trust assessments on a continual basis in a digital environment is important, because as has been discussed, it's not static, it's dynamic. Every day, tomorrow's going to be a different day than today. From a threat perspective, risks can change. So you've got to have platforms using AI and automation that can change to meet those challenges. So we also, healthcare, sensitive data handling, that's a key. If you're in finance or if you're in healthcare, we have regulatory requirements. Compliance was discussed, but we don't want to just comply. We want it, right? We don't want a D in this space. We want a solution that helps us to our A game and can help us identify where our private data is hidden, our sensitive data is hidden, can help us address that, can tie into existing security infrastructure. I think we heard in the first panel talking about integrating these solutions into the SIM to give the security practitioners at the organization that common tool set for them. So having platforms that can integrate with the existing tools, be it active scanning solutions, be it the SIM, be it other network access controls solutions that can support network segmentation efforts. That's an important piece of the next generation AI and automated security platforms. And then we heard from Chris about educating the human. And I thought that was a very good remark about the use of analytics, AI, and orchestration, right? Because again, when you turn these devices on, you're going to get a flood of new data. And data in and of itself does not solve any problems. You have to get data that's orchestrated with your existing tool sets, that's or that's orchestrated within the platform you're using to provide information that you can act on. You know, whether that's using looking at the MITRE ATT&CK framework and looking at tactics, techniques, and procedures, and then correlating that into recommendations to mitigate risks. That's one avenue. Or sending it, like I said, to your other integrated systems, using the data to help define segmentation strategies if you're using network access controls. So platforms that can integrate and adapt in that situation, and again, supporting the broader mission of the organization. So imperative number 6 is integrated adaptable programmable system. So traditionally, at least my experience, again, in healthcare is medical devices have often been a silo. Clinical engineering or health technology management takes care of medical devices, and the IT guys say, oh, that's a medical device, we don't take care of that. So it was discussed, Jim Stevens discussed early on about integrating data from these type of tool sets that I'm talking about into the SIM. And then we also heard from, I think it was Howard again, that talked about collaboration, or maybe that was Chris. But there's been several of our speakers talked about collaboration, and I think that's important. And where these tool sets come together is they allow collaboration across the security professionals, whether it's an IT person or a health technology manager, or we're bringing the business leaders in, because now we can put risk, we can put risk in context that business leaders can understand. So now not only are we just talking about risk from security practitioner perspective, but we can align it to business goals and business objectives, because AI is giving us the AI platforms are giving us the information to contextualize into that aspect, to convey the challenges to the leaders of the organization. So again, the final imperative is the melding of these AI tool sets, the automation it can provide, where it can provide it, into data-driven, because it creates information that's actionable. And then organizations I work for, particularly in developing a medical device program, was talking about our end users of those clinical systems understanding the risk of bringing these new clinical systems onto the hospital's network. So it wasn't just an IT problem. We wanted a broader understanding across the organization of what connected medical devices meant to the business leaders. So if these slides, I believe, will be presented. I had some citations throughout the slide presentation that will be made available. So.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot. I think we've got some very interesting comments and questions. We've got James says connectivity is going to be the problem of the future, so I think we're out on that. Rachel says yes, connectivity at the core of access. And then a question says, does healthcare and other similar industries have an issue that they're historically focused on safety threats, ones without agency which do not intelligently adapt, rather than security threats which have agency and adapt, and very mature frameworks? And how would AI assist? So I'm trying to distill it. Does healthcare have a threat that's basically got, do you know, it's actually very, very complex. I don't know if you've seen it.
Well, when we look at the standards for healthcare and connected medical devices from a risk management framework, the first thing we look at is patient safety. Much to the chagrin of the IT practitioners, the first thing we look at from a connected medical device risk management perspective is harm to the patient, because do no harm is kind of the core of healthcare. The second thing is business effectiveness, and that has to do with what would be the impact on operations. Would it impact the ability to provide care? And then the third thing we look at is the impact or risk to private data and or the networks. So it has traditionally been a challenge. And I mean, my experience over the years is IT generally says, patch it, that's the only solution. So that's where I see these platforms with AI and automation bringing a different context to it. Again, looking at risk and perhaps giving recommendations based on an attack, the attack framework, looking at the tactics and the techniques and the procedures and identifying the various vectors that can be exploited. And then also through the back end, looking at how the devices are connected and maybe distilling that, you know, that CVE on that device, they're not impacted, or it's not a high risk. Yeah, the CVE scored high with a CVSS score, but the way it can impact this device, if you turn off IPv6, that device can be mitigated. So, and again, this is an evolving field. The recognition that medical devices are different. Like I said, in the old days, IT would just say that's a medical device, we don't touch it. And so that it's coming together now. And as an industry, we are seeing the change where there is collaboration coming. The two sides are working together. We all recognize the challenge, but we're making, you know, we're making headway in that space. But you and I had discussed, you know, while my focus and my experience is healthcare, we see similar challenges with IoT or industrial controls. They oftentimes are put in the same light as a medical device. Industrial controls aren't routinely patched like a regular IT server or an email server or something, or just a PC endpoint. So I see AI and automation as an enabling component as things move forward to address these challenges.
Well, I like it, well, we have another comment from Noel in the audience. How many of these devices are running a full OS stack versus embedded, and how do you differentiate the risk?
Well, quite frankly, most of them are embedded. Not many of them run a full OS stack. And again, we differentiate the risk by, again, the back end of the systems, looking at the applications that can be running. It is a bit challenging in a passive environment because we're only getting what's on the packets, but we also have experience in the industry, and we are in communications with medical device manufacturers. So we have quite a large, ourselves, we have quite a large data set and knowledge base of individual devices and how they're configured. We also have disclosure statements from manufacturers that tell us what's running on the platform. So we look at those various vectors and compare those. So in that context, just because it has Windows 7, we don't say, well, CVE 2020 3418 impacts Windows 7, so therefore every Windows 7 platform is at risk. That's a differentiator in our exploit analysis. So it allows us, where back in the old days, I experienced this supporting the DoD. They just said everything that's XP has to come off the network. And from a sales perspective, when I was in a sales position, it was a great opportunity to replace everything with XP. But we believe using AI and automation, we can convey to leadership, yes, you have Windows 7 devices, but here's what we're seeing, here's what the platform's seeing, and just because it's Windows 7 doesn't mean it's a risk to your organization. Do you need the budget and plan to get rid of it? Eventually, yes, but it's not an emergency that you need to spend $1.2 million in an environment when revenue is tightly constrained, particularly in these times, to just replace it because it's Windows 7. So the platform allows you to make risk-based budgeting decisions and capital planning decisions.
I like it. I like it. Well, we're nearly out of time, but I wanted to highlight there was another question about vulnerability scoring. There was another question about the healthcare SIEM of the future. I guess to tie them together, what's next? Is there a single dashboard? What's next for you? Maybe we could tie that all together.
Well, I mean, speaking specifically for our company, we're not only tying the security portion together, we want to get more into the operational context. On the clinical side, they're looking at utilization on the clinical side. They on imaging equipment, they might be interested in dose monitoring. So I mean, we see ourselves, our platform, we're trying to become a single pane of glass, but at the same time, when we deal with red teams and blue teams, we recognize, as has been discussed all through the morning, the need to have the integrations, because red team, blue team tend to work in a different tool set. So we want to make sure that we're continuing that collaboration. The conversations I heard about sharing your APIs so people understand how things work. I know personally ourselves, that's part of our core ethos, is to be a collaborative partner, be it with our technology partners or our customers. So I'm not sure if that addressed the question, but that's where we're headed.
I like it. I like it. And there's so much going on. And can I put your email address in the chat box for people to get in touch with you?
Sure, that'd be great. Yeah.
All right, I will do that. But this is fascinating, and yeah, thank you ever so much for a great presentation, and thank you very much to ASIMILY for supporting this event. We look forward to seeing you in the audience, and I will kick it off with a virtual round of applause.
Well, I'm glad I could share my University of Colorado background with this Denver forum you have going on here.
Perfect. Yeah, I noticed that. It looks great. It looks not as snowy as Denver looks today. But it's places.
Yeah, my brother told me it didn't snow enough for him to plow, so he's okay.
Perfect. Well, thanks ever so much, and I will see you very shortly.
All right, thank you. Great time.